All right, everyone. Welcome to the Mark V Hooligans League Awards Ceremony and Recognition. I'm League Commissioner Gabe Puckett. I don't know if it's going to start here in the YouTube video that you watch, but we're going to try it. We're going to see if I can cut it down a little bit later on, just to like the start of the actual presentation. So for now, I'm just going to share my screen. I think it's this thing right here. Yep. Okay. Don't look, don't look. I got something set up for you. It's going to be really good this year. All right. So, okay. So, I'll introduce myself again, just to make sure, just in case. So, welcome. This is the Hooligans League Mark V Awards Ceremony and Distinction Recognition, hosted by me, which is League Commissioner Gabe Puckett. Really worked hard on this. I just wanted to get it a little bit more organized this year. In previous years, I've had it to where it's kind of like jumbled up onto a PowerPoint. I had a little bit more time this year. I was able to kind of get Zoom optimized so that we could use that for the presenting portion. You'll see my face in the top right pretty much for the majority of the time, unless I do something like this. Oh, perfect. So y'all probably don't see me anymore. So that's perfect. All right. So, because I kind of want you just to pay attention to the presentation, there's going to be some cool things that I kind of added in there. But we'll go ahead and start with acknowledging our mascot here. Let me move this out of the way because our new mascot is Mark. Well, say hi to Mark, everyone. No, I'm just playing. Kyle's back. Oh, he's doing a couple spins and he's gone. We don't have to dwell on that too much, though. So let's just reintroduce our team's managers. So we'll start with what I wanted to do this year is a little bit different. I wanted to kind of put a backdrop in there of each manager's favorite team. And since I don't know Jin's favorite team, I just put his favorite player. So Peanut Butter Shoes, our good friend Jin, fourth year of membership in the league, was Joe Buck yourself last season. His highest finish in our league's history was second place last year. And his color code, which is what you're going to see when he's highlighted, like he has a good player that's got an award or his team got an award for anything, his color code will be red. On to our first Eagles fan, which is the Conshohocken Killer Crabs. That's Sean. He was one of the founding members, so this is his fifth year in the league. He was formerly Lafayette Hill Hammerheads. His highest finish was first place 2 years ago, and his color code is orange. Moving on to another Eagles fan, the Regional Railers, which is our good friend Tyler Z. His second year of membership, he was Devontae's Demons last season. His highest finish was last season, eighth place, and his color code will be gray. Moving on to the only Chargers fan in the group, which is me, the Irish Hardbombs. I was also a founding member, fifth year. Last year, I was Albuquerque Alcoholics. My highest finish was second place in 2021. Thanks, Taylor and Najee Harris. And the color code for me is purple. Our Patriots fan of the group is the Rough Riders. That's Eddie. This is his second year of membership. Last year, he was the Raw Dogs. His highest finish last year was ninth place, and his color code will be magenta. Moving on to another Eagles fan, the 1925 Chicago Cardinals, which is Jared. He is our only new member this year, and his color code will be forest green. Moving on to another Eagles fan, we've got Teddy Roosevelt, which is Natalie. This is Natalie's second year of membership in the league. Highest finish was third place last year. Should have been first. If you all know, you know. Color code is indigo for Natalie. And then moving on to our Ravens fan of the group, that's Hubba Chuba, our good friend Joey. Third year of membership, formerly the Average Joes, and as the Average Joes last year, he took home the first place prize, and his color code will be pink. Another Eagles fan in the group, Crackers of the Week. Great name. I would have voted that for name of the year for sure. That's our good buddy Dylan. This is his fourth year of membership. He was the Rodney Kings pretty much all of those last 3 years. His highest finish was fourth place last year, and his color code was black. I will tell you that highest finish has been changed, a little bit of foreshadowing. But yeah, moving on to another Eagles fan. This year is Team MJ40, Matt Jones. Fourth year of membership for him. He was formerly Make It Hurts. His highest finish was sixth place in both 2021 and 2023, and his color code will be maroon. And then I don't think finally. Yeah, we're missing a couple people, but this is our Packers fan of the group. This is the Baltimore Beefcakes, Tyler Murphy. His fourth year of membership, he has been the Baltimore Beefcakes through and through. Even when we switched from ESPN to Sleeper, he kept the same name. His highest finish was third place in 2022, and his color code will be blue, like a big royal blue. And then our Jets fan of the group, of course, off to grandma. Ryan Poyastro Pearson, also a founding member of the league, fifth year, formerly a lot of things, but most recently, X gonna give it to you. And he gave it to him for sure. His highest finish that has been measured is, I don't think it's actually 11th place. I'm gonna be honest. But if it is, that's hilarious. So it's not 11th place, but I think it was like, had to have been like 10th, ninth. But anyways, the highest finish that I have on here is 2023, which is last year's 11th place. And his color code will be teal. So let's go ahead and get into our season distinction. This isn't like the poll awards that y'all were able to vote on or anything like that. I'm talking to the manager specifically. If anyone else watches this, good for you, first of all. But this is something that I did. I just gave the distinctions to specific people, specific categories, managers, players, stuff like that. So we'll go ahead and we'll start with the team with the most points for, which is the highest scoring team. And they get the medal for Crackers of the Week. Dylan scored over 2,000 points for one of the first times that has happened in this league's history. And then we go to the team at the least points for, so the lowest scoring. Fortunately, I have to pull this out for Sean. Sean, unfortunately, had the least points scored, scoring just a tad above 1,500. Moving on to the team with the least points against. So they allowed the least points. So that you could call them a lucky break. I have in previous years. So we'll go ahead and give them a medal. Good job, Jin. Allowed just a little bit under 1,700 points. And then, of course, we have to go to the team with the most points against, and they get the trash bag. That is going to be Tyler Z. Allowed over 1,900 points, almost 2,000 points allowed. And I'm sure even he can remember the stretch where he was just losing in teams despite putting up 160, 170 points. And one of those teams was me. So I remember that quite clearly. So unfortunate trail for him. It did lead to a pretty bad record, but we'll get there. The most valuable player. So this one was a very difficult one to do because I did not know which one I should choose. Should I go for a quarterback? Should I go for a running back? Probably wasn't going to go for a wide receiver. There was only one guy I was really thinking at receiver, but really it all came down to the fact that which fantasy player was most consistent, despite the fact that this team didn't necessarily finish towards the top. And the team that he's on also might not finish towards the top. But I decided that our MVP this year should go to Lamar Jackson of the Baltimore Ravens. He was drafted in round three, tail end of round three by Joey Hubachuba. He was the third quarterback off the board after Jalen Hurts and Josh Allen in that order. He scored over 400 fantasy points in total. He only had 3 games below 20 points. His lowest was 14.88 against the Steelers. And that game was the only week where he was ranked outside of the top 12 among all fantasy quarterbacks for a given week. He had 43 total touchdowns, 39 passing, 4 rushing, which I was shocked that it was that low. He had 0 games without a touchdown, and he only had 4 interceptions on the season for the regular season for fantasy football specifically. He had 39 passing touchdowns, which led the NFL. And he had 4,807 total yards, 3,955 passing, 852 rushing. He only had 1 game below 200 all-purpose yards, and that was week 12 against the Chargers defense, which, by the way, has allowed, and I'm saying this, I'm gloating, has allowed the least amount of points to this date, at least, of any team in the league. Now we get to our least valuable player. And when I say that the most valuable player was difficult, this one was not. We all know the answer, Christian McCaffrey. He was drafted with the second pick in the draft by Tyler Murphy. He was the second running back off the board, shockingly, after Breece Hall was taken by Ryan, first overall. He only had 47.8 total fantasy points through 4 games. First of all, that's been outscored by people in 1 week, let alone the entire season. He failed to score above 20 fantasy points in any point this season, and he had a 348 total yards, which is 202 rushing, 146 receiving, with 0 touchdowns. I would like to mention that Saquon Barkley almost topped his total yardage in 1 game, and he only had 2 games above 100 all-purpose yards. So tough outing for him. Anyways, let's move on to the most lopsided victory in our league. That would have to be the Week 12 matchup between Jin and Sean. We'll start with Sean's side. Tough outing, scored 87.1. I believe it was the lowest of that week. Not the lowest of all season, but still not great. So what led to that? The only player on bye was backup tight end Dawson Knox, so you can't attribute it to the bye weeks. The only player to score above 12 points was Jackson Smith and Jigba, who had 19.7 and was in the starting lineup. I will mention that. Cedric Tillman got hurt during the game, and he did not return for the rest of the season. I can't remember how many points he had, but it was not a lot. It was like sub six, I think. Austin Eckler, Sam Laporta, and Xavier Worthy, who are all in the starting lineup, combined for 18.4 fantasy points. So not a great outing. The only big mistake here was that the Packers defense was benched and scored 18 points. Otherwise, nobody on Sean's team performed. Not to be the same for Jin, who scored 173.96 fantasy points, which is an 86.86 point win margin, the largest of the season. Alvin Kamara, Devontae Adams, and Amari Cooper were all on bye. At the time, the really only one you would consider starting to give credit to Devontae's turn of the better at the end of the season was Alvin Kamara. Amari Cooper, you weren't starting at that point in time. Saquon Barkley had the season high 46.2 fantasy points, and he had over 300 all-purpose yards through the air and on the ground. And Cortland Sutton had a season high of 29.7 fantasy points. So that kind of attributed to a lot of it. Also, there were only three players below 12 fantasy points. And those were Demarcus Robinson, Dallas Goedert, and the Vikings defense, if you want to count them as a player. The Eagles defense was left on the bench after scoring 14 points as well. But yeah, we'll go ahead and move on to our closest game, the other side of it. Week 3 matchup between Natalie and Tyler Murphy. This one was really close. They both had their shortcomings, but it really just came down to inches. So the Baltimore Beefcakes, Tyler Murphy, scored 103.54. Jordan Love and Christian McCaffrey were out due to injury. Obviously, Christian McCaffrey was out for a lot longer than that, but Jordan Love was on his little phase where he was out at the beginning of the season. They thought he was gone for the year. Malik Willis came in and performed, but Love came back quickly. Packers made the playoffs. Rashid Shaheed had a season low of 0 fantasy points before his injury. And Devon Achane was on his streak of the first of 3 games that he would have below 10 fantasy points. Not great, but what helped was that those would be the only games that he'd have below that mark. Brandon Aubrey and the Texans defense both started together and both combined for 17 fantasy points. Nobody on the bench scored above 10 fantasy points. The closest was Chase Brown. Moving on to Natalie. It was really close. 103.78, a 0.24 point win margin. Not the closest we've had in our league's history. If those who remember 3 years ago remember the exact tied score that came down to bench points that was changed through point adjustment later on, but still. Joe Mixon and Josh Palmer were out due to injury. Bad to lose Joe Mixon, probably good to lose Josh Palmer. Jonathan Taylor finished as the RB5 with 26.5 fantasy points. That probably attributed to a lot of it, considering he led all starters in points. Devin Singletary did have a season high of 18.8 fantasy points, which is really good. And Jaden Daniels, Deontay Johnson, and Jake Ferguson, who had those points that you see on the screen, were all left on the bench, which would have outscored every possible starter. So Jaden Daniels outscored every possible quarterback, Deontay Johnson, every possible receiver, and Ferguson, every possible tight end. So close matchup, could have been a little bit further in favor of Natalie. There was really nothing that Tyler could do. We'll move on to the biggest upset. I believe it was this matchup, week 15 playoff round 1 matchup between Jin and Matt, because truly unprecedented that Jin went out this early. We'll go ahead and cover his side first. He scored 143.22 points. Amazing outing. Devontae Adams had a season high 42.8 fantasy points. That's a really storied performance. It was top 10 scoring performance of the season. Jason Sanders and the Eagles defense combined for 18 fantasy points. Dallas Goedert was on IR, but that's okay because the replacement Noah Gray scored 10.1 fantasy points. Great find in a time of need. And Amari Cooper had his season low of 0 fantasy points. Again, you're not starting Amari Cooper in most situations. And Saquon Barkley had his 3rd game below 10 fantasy points, which probably attributed to such a bad loss. He came to the match as the 3 seed with most weeks as the number 1 seed of any team. And then we'll go ahead and move on to Matt's insane performance of 172.3 fantasy points to knock Jen out of the playoffs early. Kenneth Walker was out due to injury, but that didn't matter because AJ Brown led the match with season high 25 fantasy points. Not to mention, there were only two players that were below 12 and a half fantasy points. Those were Calvin Ridley and Younghoe Koo. The Broncos defense had their second game above 20 fantasy points, and there was only one bench player above 10 fantasy points. That was the Dolphins defense. They clinched the playoffs as the final seed at last second and moved on to the league semifinals just through this matchup alone. So we'll go into the best trade. Now, the trades are kind of weird to judge because I thought that there wouldn't be any trades, but then they all happened kind of towards the last second. So when you think about best trades, just remember it doesn't all have to be for both sides. Like there could be one side that really benefited more than the other. And I feel like there is no better way to think about this situation than to cover the trade that happened between the Tylers. And I think you might know what I'm talking about here. Here we'll start with what Tyler Z got. So he received not quarterbacks, quarterback Jordan Love and wide receiver Jaden Reed. First of all, unprecedented that Tyler traded two Packers. I would have never thought that would happen, considering he wanted AJ Dillon for me so much a couple years ago. But still, Jordan Love never reached any strides after the trade before week 14, and his highest total was 17.56 fantasy points against the Seahawks. Not great. Jaden Reed also fell off after the trade. His highest total was 11.10 fantasy points. He had that twice against Seattle and at home against the New Orleans Saints, and he had zero fantasy points against the Detroit Lions. Not great. Um, Tyler Z failed to make the playoffs. He narrowly avoided league punishment with an early playoff win in the first round. He was very lucky to get away from that because if you take into account his point totals over the next couple of weeks, he could have very well been doing some peanut butter shoes. Either way, let's move on. Let's move on to Tyler Murphy. Trading with Jordan Love and Jaden Reed at the top of their game. I mean, that's pretty crazy. I mean, what'd you get in return? Yeah, Josh Allen, literally days before he went off. Immediately had the best impact of any fantasy player. He went off for 51.88 fantasy points in week 14. Literally, this trade happened days before week 14 started. He did this against the Rams. It was the most of any quarterback in history. It was top 10 among all players in fantasy history. And then he followed it up. He said, okay, I'll just go out and do 41.28 fantasy points against the Detroit Lions. 93.16 fantasy points over two games is the best of any player in a two-game stretch in NFL fantasy football history. He fell short in the second round of the playoffs on the cusp of an unfortunate outing after the big crazy like matchup towards the end of the season. 11.16 fantasy points from Allen, so it kind of hurt him in the end. But Jordan Love wouldn't have done it much better. He was going to fall out of the playoffs anyways. Now we'll go to the worst trade. Again, difficult to track, but really, when you look at this trade was not impactful for either side in any way, shape, or form. And that is unfortunate because it involved me. So the trade between me and Eddie at the turn of me extending the trade deadline, we got a trade done. I had sent this proposal out a couple of times. This finally budged. But first of all, I got Tyreek Hill, which if you asked me towards the beginning of the season, would I be ecstatic about this trade? I'd say yes, because I was targeting Tyreek Hill pretty early on. He did show immediate impact. He had two straight, 20 plus point games, but his highest was against the Jets, 28.1 fantasy points, and then he completely fell off. He floundered in the playoffs. He didn't score above 12 fantasy points. He had 5.6 fantasy points at Houston in round one, despite me being on bye. So thank goodness I didn't have to experience that. But I did experience it eventually. He fell out of the playoffs. I fell out of the playoffs in round two, despite coming in with the first round bye. Didn't get much better for Eddie. Eddie got Marvin Harrison Jr., which, again, at the beginning of the season, he'd probably be pretty ecstatic, despite trading away Tyreek Hill. Like Hill, though, Harrison showed some promise early on. He had 17 points against the Minnesota Vikings defense on Thanksgiving. And then, like Hill, he disappeared in the playoffs. He had three straight weeks below 10 fantasy points. He finished with 15.6 fantasy points, which is his highest total since that Minnesota game on Thanksgiving in the final round of the playoffs. Second highest, I'm sorry, since the Cardinals bye week. I think it was the second highest to the 17 points. But Eddie did fail to make the playoffs and fell all the way to last place. Foreshadowing, kind of giving away who's going to be last place here, but still. Moving on to the best regular season record. There's one medal, There's two medals. It's a two-way tie. So we'll start with the first one. Dylan got a record of 10-4, and much like Dylan's 10-4 record, it was shared by me. I got 10-4 as well. To the worst regular season record. You'll see I'm kind of trying to fly through this a little bit because I want to get to the big important stuff that y'all voted on. So one, two, three, four tied worst regular season records. So we'll start with Sean. Sean got a record of 5-9 that is shared with three other teams. First, with Tyler Z sharing the 5-9 record. Then someone who's very close to Sean, Natalie, who got 5-9. And then someone who is close to me, Sean. Who else? Name it. Ryan. It got 5-9 record. All right. The longest win streak gets a medal. The longest winning streak of any team, I really had to look for this and I had to check it twice, kind of like Santa Claus, because I really got a good gift with this one. I did not think I had the longest win streak. I had a 5-game win streak. It started in week 10. I defeated Jared by roughly 22 points or so, 21 and a half, give or take. And I took it to the end of the season. I didn't lose. As a matter of fact, and I didn't put this in there because, I mean, I'm not trying to gloat or anything, but I only had one loss between weeks 5 to 14. That was week 9, obviously, because this starts the streak. And I cannot remember who I lost to, but I know that that was the only one that I had lost. So great. Good job by me. I still got third place. Again, foreshadowing, but still. Longest losing streak, on the other hand. Interesting one here. Tyler Z unfortunately lost 5 games in a row, much like me winning 5 games in a row. So started in week 7, lost to Matt Jones by about 2.5 points. Tough loss. Took it all the way to week 11, finally won in week 12 to Natalie by about 27 points to end the losing streak. Didn't fare much better afterwards, but that's okay. Most consecutive weeks in first place. This should be no surprise. Jen, of course, a 7-week streak in first place. To the start of the season, secured first place by points 4 with a crazy win over Sean. And then in week 8, lost it to Dylan, knocked out of first place, all the way to third place by Dylan, because I believe it was me that took second. But Dylan winning by scoring 150.8 fantasy points definitely put him at the top of the list. Now, most consecutive weeks in last place. This one was difficult to find, but I found it twice. Sean, unfortunately, my friend, you had a 3-week streak in last place twice. We'll start with week 8, losing to Ryan. That's the wrong color code for Ryan, but you took last place from Jared, and then that ended in week 11 when you beat Tyler Z, and Tyler Z took last place from you. But don't worry, because we'll work our way back to week 12. So losing in such bad fashion and the most lopsided victory of the season for Jen, you took last place from Tyler Z and maintained it for the rest of the season. Unfortunate. All right, let's move on to the best performance by a singular team, and that was shocker Jin with a 197.08 fantasy point outing in week 9 over Tyler Z. This is one of those streaks where it was like, man, Tyler Z is just getting killed here. Yeah, you see 158.9 points. That's not bad. That would have won any other game that week. Brian Robinson, Isaiah Pacheco, Brandon Cooks, and Amari Cooper were all out on Jin's team due to injury. There were only 2 players, though, below 10 fantasy points, and they were Justice Hill and Daniel Carlson. Jameis Winston was starting at quarterback for Jin and outscored by both backups, Kirk Cousins and CJ Stroud. Not by a lot, but still notable enough to mention here. Every skill position besides Justice Hill scored 22 plus fantasy points, and that's pretty much what culminated in this win. Now, best performance by a player. If you remember the wonderful performance by Ja'Marr Chase, we witnessed greatness here. Drafted 8th overall in the draft by Dylan. And this was week 10 against the Baltimore Ravens, which was that crazy loss right at the end of the game by 1 point. Oh, that Bengals defense. 11 receptions on 17 targets for Ja'Marr Chase for 264 receiving yards and 3 touchdowns culminated in 55.4 fantasy points. Dylan defeated Ryan that week, not by as much as you would think, but really when you take away Ja'Marr Chase, I mean, it's obvious he was MVP that week because Dylan would have lost that match. Moving on to the best performance by a bench player. Again, if you can remember Jamar Chase, you can remember Taysom Hill. What an outing by Taysom Hill. Drafted 15th round, the second pick in that round by Tyler, was dropped before Tyler picked him back up. So this happened week 11 against the Browns in a 35-14 win, obviously. Um, Taysom Hill did everything. He passed twice, got a completion for 18 yards. Unfortunately, on that other pass, he threw an interception. He did have 7 rushes for 138 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns. He also had 8 receptions on 10 targets for 50 yards and unfortunately a fumble, which dropped his points. That's okay. Didn't drop it too far. He had 41.52 fantasy points, which stands this year as the best single performance by a tight end, no matter whether they were starting or on the bench. Um, Tyler did defeat Jin by a pretty good margin, but didn't start Taysom Hill. But that's okay because pretty much if Tyler had started all the tight ends that week, he would have had the first, second, and third best tight ends of the week. It was a great performance. Unfortunate that it happened to be on the bench, but when you really look at the rest of Taysom Hill's year, yeah, no wonder he was on the bench. Moving on to the most consistent lineup. And straight road for Ryan had the most consistent lineup this year. He kept 13 of his drafted players. The only ones that he did not keep, Dak Prescott, because of his season-ending injury. He dropped the Jets defense. He traded Jerry Jeudy in the Justin Herbert trade, and he dropped Aaron Rodgers. So the fact that he dropped Aaron Rodgers in the Jets defense is pretty insane. Notable players that he kept and um, pretty much kept all season long. Breece Hall, his first overall pick. Evan Engram, a pretty nice late round gem in the 7th round. And another late round gem, literally almost a last round gem, if not the last round gem, Darnell Mooney, who was his first pick in round 17. And he finished with a 5-9 record, unfortunately. Now, the least consistent lineup, a little bit of a wavy road for Sean, usually known on the least consistent lineup list, but he only kept 7 of his drafted players. The only ones he kept were Amon-Ra St. Brown, Sam Laporta, Michael Pittman Jr., Kyler Murray, Raheem Mostert, Xavier Worthy, and Jackson Smith-Njigba. Some good choices, some bad choices. Notable players that he did drop were Stephon Diggs, who he drafted in round 3 and had that torn ACL that was so devastating. The Eagles defense, who was reacquired somewhere else and did much better, and Hunter Henry, who was kind of on and off all year. He also finished with a 5-9 record. So if this goes to show you anything, having the most consistent lineup and the least consistent lineup doesn't really mean you're doing all the best. It's kind of good to have a mix in between. The most player transactions. So when I was doing these transactions in previous not performances, presentations, I was counting it as free agency transactions. I needed to count it as player transactions because some people were making more trades than others. So this counts for player transactions that happen in free agency or in trade. So we'll go ahead and start with the most player transactions. So wavy road, but it's because team changed a lot for Jin. In this situation, Jin had 45 players transacted through trade and free agency. Notable players that he added through these were Baker Mayfield, who he traded for, the Eagles defense, and Amir Abdullah, who had a great late season impact with the injury-riddled Raiders running back core. He finished with a 9-5 record. Now, the least player transactions, so another straight road, this time for Eddie. Eddie only transacted 11 players. Notable players include Marvin Harrison Jr., who he traded for, previously mentioned, Dalton Schultz, and Geno Smith, who was added really early on in the year and kind of helped him towards the end. He did finish with a 6-8 record. Now, on to the poll questions, what y'all have been waiting for and probably skipped all of the other stuff to come to here for. Just letting you know that I'm absolutely parched. I'm not taking a drink of water because I'm going to persevere. All right. Who was the best quarterback this season? Well, we'll go ahead and start towards the back. This was a 2-player vote. Only 2 players received votes here. So we'll go ahead and start with second place. It was very close. Lamar Jackson, who was drafted by Joey, round 3, pick 11, got 5 votes. And now for first place, 6 votes. If it's not going to be Lamar Jackson, it's going to be Josh Allen. This is really close. It came down to the last survey I got. Drafted by Tyler in the 3rd round and was then traded to the other Tyler. Still a crazy trade. Who's the best running back? Who'd y'all vote for? Just call out names. Who'd you vote for? I can guarantee you we're all going to say the same thing. because Saquon Barkley is yet again a unanimous vote, drafted by Jin at the tail end of the first round. Now, who is the best wide receiver? A little bit of a discourse here, not too much. Third place had one vote, and that was for A.J. Brown, who was drafted by Matt Jones in the first round. Then we'll go to second place, two votes for Justin Jefferson, who was drafted by Natalie, also in the first round. And then for the kind of bell cow here, eight votes for Jamar Chase, who was also drafted in the first round, this one by Dylan. Now, who is the best tight end? Who do y'all think was the best tight end? You can go ahead and call out names. One name will be mentioned more than the others. Not unanimous, but we'll go ahead and start with tied in second place with one vote. Jonnu Smith got a vote this year, who's undrafted and then added from free agency by Matt Jones. Pretty much remained there for the rest of the season. Also tied for second place with one vote was Trey McBride, who was drafted by me in round 3. And then also tied for second with one vote was George Kittle, who was drafted by Eddie in round 2, tail end of round 2. I'm shocked Kittle lasted that long. First place got 8 votes, and this should come as no surprise to anyone, but the best tight end this year, and I full-heartedly agree with this, is Brock Bowers, who was drafted by Dylan in round 8. What a steal. Now, moving on to the best kicker. Obviously, we're going to have a little bit more people voting for different players here, and maybe not the same guy, but there was still a clear-cut number 1. So we'll get there. Tied for third place with one vote is Matt Gay. Interesting vote here, but yeah, he was undrafted and added to Matt Jones's team, and then dropped to the free agency not too far afterwards. I guess he had a good spurt earlier on in the year. I guess I can't remember really. He was pretty good last year. Moving on to another tied for third place with one vote was Kami Fairbairn. I was thrilled to see his name here because I didn't vote for him. He was drafted by me, round 13, pick 5. It was going to be Cameron Dicker. Those who were there at the draft party know what happened. Anyways, we'll go ahead and get tied second place, 2 votes. And speak of the devil, Cameron Dicker gets 2 votes on the board for the LA Chargers, drafted by Ryan. Literally after I had mentioned, oh, I should take him because Ryan's already got another kicker. He took Harrison Butker. And then Ryan screwed me over, picked him at the start of the 13th round. Tied for him, second place, 2 votes for Brandon Aubrey of the Dallas Cowboys. Tyler Murphy took him in round 12, tail end of round 12. Smart choice. And now first place, the one kicker that was voted for that was not drafted, Chris Boswell, not drafted in the fantasy draft, eventually picked up by Jen and finished with Sean. So always good to have Boswell on the team. Now, who is the best defense special teams this year? Very interesting vote. So we'll start with third place. One vote got to the Pittsburgh Steelers, which was my defense for the majority of the season. Picked them in round 12. 2 votes then for the Denver Broncos. Interesting. Undrafted. Added from free agency by Tyler Z and finished with Matt Jones. And then the rest of the votes, I should have known, went to the Philadelphia Eagles. So yeah, it was drafted by Sean in round 12 and then finished with Jim. Now, who is the best draft pick this season? Doesn't matter what position, where they could have gone, who picked them up. It just mattered. Were they the best one? So we'll go ahead and start. We'll do tied for third place here with one vote for Cameron Dicker by Ryan. Shocker. I wonder who voted for that. It was not Ryan. Shocker. Moving on, another tied for third place, one vote for Joe Mixon, drafted by Natalie in round 5. And then another tied for third place, this time for Darnell Mooney, drafted by Ryan in round 17. Then a tied for second place here. 2 votes went to Saquon Barkley of the Philadelphia Eagles, drafted by Jin in round 1. Another tied for second place. 2 votes for Brock Bowers, drafted by Dylan. And then first place, 4 votes. The best draft pick this season, as voted by you, was Jamar Chase, also drafted by Dylan in the first round. Who was the worst draft pick this season? A little bit less discourse here. You'll pretty much be able to figure out who it was, but we'll go ahead and start tied third place, 1 vote. Pretty shocked this wasn't unanimous, but anyways, Curtis Samuel got a vote for worst draft pick this year, drafted by Tyler Z in round 11, and then finished on free agency. You're going to sense a common theme here. Also tied for third place with Curtis Samuel was Tyreek Hill, who started on Eddie's team and finished on mine. Moving to tied for third place with a 1 vote, tied with Curtis Samuel and Tyreek Hill, is Rashee Rice, who was drafted by Eddie in round 6 and pretty much kept on IR all season long after the torn ACL. Second place got 2 votes. Breece Hall received 2 votes this year, drafted by Ryan with the first overall pick. Maybe didn't reach the value of the first overall pick, but really, if you ain't first, you're last. Speaking of last, 6 votes went to Christian McCaffrey. Shocker, picked with the second pick in the draft. This is a runaway, absolutely no questions about it. I would have voted the same thing. Now, this one's always a lot controversial because you never really know what people are going to vote for on the biggest steal. So we'll go ahead and start. There was a clear-cut winner. We'll get there. Biggest steal of the year. We'll start with tied for third place. 1 vote went to Lad McConkey, who was drafted by me in round 7. I full-heartedly agree with at least 1 vote. And then moving on to another vote for Jamar Chase. Interesting to label him as a steal. I guess it's because he went so late in round 1. A lot of receivers went before. So I understand. Another vote went to J.K. Dobbins, who was drafted by me in round 11. Shocked I got him that late. I should note that I didn't put this on there for reasons unknown, but I did eventually trade him to Tyler Z in a trade that I needed a player for. So yeah, so that happened. Another vote went to Terry McLaurin, who was drafted by Jared. Again, wrong color code there. Drafted by Jared in round 6. Tied for third place with another vote is Chuba Hubbard, who was drafted by Joey in round 10. And then another vote went to Brian Thomas Jr., full-heartedly agree here, drafted by Dylan in round 11. Then 2 votes, second place went to Darnell Mooney. Yes, I full-heartedly agree with this. Ryan got him in round 17 and did get some pretty nice value out of him. And then finally, first place with 3 votes. The biggest steal of the season, 100% agree with this, Brock Bowers. There's no way you could even think about drafting a tight end without thinking about Brock Bowers next year. He will 100% not go 8th round. The fact that he went 8th round this year and people say never wait for a tight end, always take him early because there's only a select group of good ones. Well, all those guys floundered this year. Brock Bowers didn't. He's easily the biggest steal this season. Moving on to who had the most well-rounded team as voted by you. Remember, you could not vote for yourself. So we'll go ahead and start with third place, who got 1 vote. Teddy Roosevelt, Natalie pulling a vote right at the end. Second place got 3 votes. It was close. Crackers of the week, Dylan. And then the most well-rounded team as voted by everyone was Jin's Peanut Butter Shoes. Moving on to best team name. There were a couple people that got votes here. We'll start with tied for 4th place. There was 1 vote each for these 2 teams. The Baltimore Beefcakes, they usually get a perennial vote, and Teddy Roosevelt. They each had 1 vote each for best team name. Third place had 2 votes. That was Crackers of the Week, Dylan. And then second place with 3 votes was the Irish Hardbombs. I very much appreciate who voted for me. And then, of course, first place with 4 votes. It wouldn't be this year if you didn't have peanut butter shoes. So Jin pulls away with the most well-rounded team and best team name awards this season. Now, the final league standings. The manager's already know it, so let's go ahead and announce it for everyone. In 12th place this year, dead last, and the peanut butter miler. I decided I didn't just want to put names. I wanted to kind of spell it out for you. So here's peanut butter colored shoes. I couldn't find pictures of peanut butter shoes. If we would have done this after the peanut butter mile, then it would have been counterintuitive. But yeah, Eddie. So Eddie got last place this year. We'll have to do the peanut butter mile. We'll be scheduling that pretty soon. 11th place, the almost peanut butter miler, keeping those shoes clean over there, Ryan, barely making it out alive and not having to do the punishments. He made a song about it. Ask him about it later. 10th place, they tried. Kind of a shrug. Sorry, Sean, it was very close. At least you don't have to run the peanut butter mile. 9th place, they tried harder. Same thing, right? No, they tried harder. So Jared walked away with 9th place in his inaugural season. Again, avoiding the peanut butter shoes. That's really all that matters, right? 8th place. A pleasure to have in class. I had to move this one up a little bit because not as many people made the playoffs this year, years before. But yeah, pleasure to have in class. Good job, Tyler, getting the same place as last year. Consistency is key. 7th place. The toilet bowl MVP. There would be no other way to describe it. Good job, Natalie, pulling out alive. Had Natalie made the playoffs, she would have made a long run. Sixth place, the playoffs, LVP, least valuable player. There was no better way to describe it other than just throwing it upside down. Joey, who was our league champion last year, unfortunately fell to last in the playoffs. Did make the playoffs though, so not bad. Fifth place, comfortable passing grade, which I would say is a B minus. Hell, C minus. C's get degrees. Whatever. That's just my own in interpretation of a comfortable passing grade. But yeah, Jin, despite having the most well-rounded team, the most weeks in first place, and one of the better win streaks besides mine, yeah, Jin got killed early on and just got decimated and put in last place. That was the biggest upset as well. Fourth place, podium cleaner. Here you go, Tyler Murphy. I'm sorry I had to put you there, bud. But yeah, so Tyler Murphy walks away with fourth place, just missing out on the podium. Third place, that's me. Bronze medal, participation trophy of the podium. Here's my medal. I'll take that. That's fine. Better than previous years. Worse than others, but I didn't have to deal with Najee Harris, so that's okay. I wasn't on the edge of my seat this year. Second place, who was on the edge of his seat, silver medal, the almost undisputed champion of the league, a silver medal, but oh, he almost had it. Sorry, Matt. Matt Jones, Team MJ40, walking away with second place this year and the second place prize. Now, first place, he said he would do it. He said it and nobody believed him because he has said it in previous years. He said it a couple years ago when he took Keenan Allen and Mike Williams in the same draft and then both of them got hurt. He said it last year. He said it this year and nobody believed him. The gold medal and the undisputed champion of Hooligans League this year is Dylan. Walks away with the victory and the grand prize. Will be getting a trophy very soon. We'll have to put it up near the TV stand or wherever he's allowed to put it. So just in case you wanted the final standings listed, here they are with the accurate positions, records, what people finished with in the regular season. As you could see, Matt Jones had made a hell of a run in the playoffs. 7-7 record coming in. Barely made it as the sixth seed, went all the way up to second place and won some prize money. Other teams like Jin should not have been that far down with 9-5. Eddie, despite not having a 5-9 record, was 6-8 and last place. As you can see, it kind of varied. Now, this is the important one for the managers, motions. And I felt that there was no better way to start this than to just go ahead. Let's just, you know what? Motions 1 through 8, let's skip them real quick. Let's go to the really big important one because this has so many implications for the other motions that I feel it would be best to not leave you out hanging. Because if this passes a certain way, then there are other motions that won't be able to be passed if they were voted that way. So just because of the format of ESPN and the inability to accommodate some of the motions. So we'll go ahead and get this one out of the way. So motion 9 was the request to revert the league format from Sleeper back to ESPN. And this motion failed by a vote of 3-8. Only 3 people wanted to push Sleeper back to ESPN. So that means the league format will remain on Sleeper for the foreseeable future. And due to this, all motion votes from here on out, motions 1 through 8 will be validated completely and totally as Sleeper supports all the format of all the motions. So we'll go ahead and move on from there. Let's get the big one out of the way. Exhale. You know what app you're playing on next year. So motion 1, the request to pause the fantasy football draft if a team on the clock specifically decides to discuss a trade with another team. So this passed by a vote of 6-5. So teams that are on the clock only can only request to pause for a trade if the other team is interested in the trade. So if the other team says no, that clock's going to continue to run. Their clock will be on. I'm not pausing anything. We are not having any leniency. Please, for the love of God, no sabotaging. If someone says, hey, you want to make a trade? You can't say, let me think about it for 55 seconds. Don't do that. I will punish you. The clock will be paused for 1 minute maximum per round per manager. So what that means is, since trades exist, if you have traded for more than 1 pick in a round, please note that you will have 1 minute for all picks combined in said round. So for example, let's say you have, let's go to the first round. Let's say you have the first overall pick, the third overall pick, and the seventh overall pick, and you want to discuss trades for your first and seventh overall pick. You have 1 minute combined to discuss both of them. I promise I will keep a mark of this. Motion two, the request to turn the league into a two quarterback league. This would only be enacted if motion three has a lower approval rate. No need to go ahead and dwell on this. This failed by a vote of 5-6, so the league will remain a standard one quarterback league without any changes whatsoever. Motion three, the request to turn the second flex spot into a super flex spot. So this would accommodate for a quarterback and would also be able to accommodate for a wide receiver, running back, tight end. My personal favorite, not anyone else. So this voted failed by a vote of 3-8. So both flex spots will remain standard flex spots without any changes whatsoever. Motion four, the request to raise the league buy-in from $20 to $25 for the upcoming season. This motion passed by a vote of 10-1, very popular. So I explained it in the motion that y'all are voting for. So what's going to happen is the total amount of dues raised will go up in total from $240 to $300 with this. $60 will remain the set amount set aside for Super Bowl party or fantasy draft party for food and refreshments, just getting everything together, just to give us a little bit of leeway. Whoever's hosting it will have that money and be able to use that as much as they can. Third place prize remains $20. So based on the previous buy-in. We can kind of work with this in future league motions if not everyone agrees with the fact that third place gets $20, or should they receive 25 because that's the new buy-in, or anything else. So I also explained this, but second place prize goes up from $60 to $80 with this, and first place prize goes up from $100 to $140. So a little bit more money to fight for if you're pushing for the league crown next year. Speaking of league dues, motion five was requesting to enact an official deadline for league dues. I don't know why there's a comma at the end of that instead of a period. Either way, basically what this means, and I'm just going to explain for everyone, we've kind of been just like, oh, the league dues will be due by this time this year and this time the next year. I just wanted to make it simple and kind of just set a day so that everyone knows what to shoot for and I don't have to forget and be like, oh, yeah, get your dues in by a week's time. Now, I want people to have a little bit more leeway. So basically, this kind of had the same results as the last one, passed with flying colors, 10-1 vote. So the official deadline for league dues will now be set to Thanksgiving Day every single season, only subject to change if people want to change it. This is unlikely to change given the flexibility of the date. I'm unlikely to keep pushing it off, but it can be stretched in circumstances of severe financial hardship, life's sometimes you never know what happens. So this could be a private conversation with me. I'm not going to like dwell it out to the league. I promise I'm not going to judge you for anything. If you made a bad betting decision, you lost your house, like it's probably not going to happen in this league, but still, like if that happens, just let me know. I'll push it off. I'll comp you for a season. I'm not going to do anything crazy like paying your dues for the next 10 years, but still, just like talk to me. Like I'm an open book. I promise. I'm not going to like go tell your secrets to the entire league, but that's just it passed. We've got the deadline set. Less to worry about. Motion six, the request to turn Hooligans League into a keeper league. So I will preface this by apologizing, but I'll tell you that the vote did pass by a vote of 6-5. So my explanation for a dynasty league was dead wrong, incorrect. I was informed by a good friend of mine, Ryan, that my description of a dynasty league was very wrong. I did a little bit of information. What I described was a keeper league. So we're going to move forward as a keeper league. And we're going to do that. So what happens next season? You're going to be allowed to keep up to two players from your previous year's team. So let's just say with me, you know what? I want to keep Lad McConkey and Trey McBride. I could keep those guys. So the way it's going to work is those players won't be draftable. So if I choose to keep Lad McConkey, you're not going to be able to draft him next year. I'm going to have him on my team. But whatever round the player was selected, you will not draft a player in that round. So, for example, let's just say I drafted Lad McConkey in round 6 this year. I don't remember if it was round 6 or round 7, but let's just say round 6, just for hypotheticals. I would not have a 6th round selection. So let's just say another example. Let's say for some reason or not, Tyler Murphy says, you know what? I think Christian McCaffrey is going to come back to full form next year. I think I'm going to keep him. He would not have a first round pick. It's not that he wouldn't have first round pick, second overall pick, because he's not second overall pick this coming year. He just wouldn't have a first round pick. So make your choices carefully. It's going to be an interesting one. So the Dynasty League format, which in short is basically you would keep all of your players and only draft rookies and have extended lineups. It'll be put up for motion upon request. So the person that put in the Dynasty League motion, I'm sorry. First of all, I don't know who it was. So if you put it in, if you would like that to go up for vote and push that into next season's motions, let me know. Or whenever I start gathering motions for the next season, just put it on there. We'll put it up for vote. And it will have a proper explanation. I'll make sure to I will Gemini, Google AI, Chat GPT, everything possible to make sure that everyone knows exactly what it is, including myself. Motion 7. So that was the request to add a defensive player to the roster as an IDP flex position. So one specific defensive player could be a defensive tackle, defensive end, pass rusher, linebacker, corner, safety, anyone, just one player. And that seemed a little bit too confusing to me too. That's why the motion failed by a vote of 2-9. So defensive flex will not be added to the roster. There will be no extra round, no changes. The current defensive special teams position will have no change whatsoever. It'll be you draft the same defense that you normally would. And then motion 8, the request to repeal a previous motion that was placed in that bars teams that are out of contention for playoff prize money or punishment from adding or dropping players in free agency. This is our first ever request to repeal a previous motion. And it did not go well. So it didn't pass by a vote of 2-9. So the barring will continue as normal. So basically, what this means is it happened to a couple teams this year. I'm sure you remember correctly. Let's just say Jin and Joey make the playoffs next year and lose in the first round. With the current playoff format, there would be no way for them to get any higher than fifth place or any lower than sixth. And it shows that they got fifth and sixth this year. So they would be barred from adding players to make it more competitive for those that still had a chance of avoiding the punishment or having the punishment, vice versa, or getting any prize money. So if you have an injury concern on your team, this did happen a couple times this year, and your roster is locked, please let me know immediately so that I can unlock your roster. You can try to get the best player possible. That is the only way that I will unlock a roster in that situation. I just want to make sure you have a full roster and it can be as competitive as possible because I want to keep this as competitive for anyone that even is out of the consideration for prize money or punishment. Now, looking forward to next season, I do this every year. Fantasy draft will be held after the majority of the rookies have already signed their rookie contracts with their new teams. So most likely sometime in the preseason. Hell, we might put a motion out there to set a day for the draft. But yeah, this won't change by season. It'll only change by like specific motions. I doubt that'll happen. The draft will be held in reverse order of the final standings of this season, including playoffs. So that means, Eddie, you are on the clock, brother. You got the first pick, unless you do something wrong, which you won't. So the new Keeper League format will be instituted immediately after this video is posted to YouTube. And you'll have immediate access to your players. You'll be able to keep specific ones and you'll be able to kind of mull over your decisions. So as soon as this is posted to YouTube, I'm turning on Keeper. So be ready. Go ahead and pick your players. I'll set it to 2 players maximum. So you don't have to keep any players. If your team was just god awful and you don't want any of your players, you could choose to keep 0. But you have the option. You can choose 1. Hell, let's just say, oh, well, I don't want to keep Trey McBride, but I'll keep Lad McConkey. I can just keep Lad McConkey. You don't have to keep 2 players, but it gives you the option. So you can keep up to 2. Who you keep will be public information. If it is not public on the app, I will let everyone know. I want people to know who's draftable so they can have a proper draft strategy going into the draft next season. If they're looking for Lad McConkey and I've already kept him, then they could be like, oh, well, I'm going to take Lad McConkey this round so that nobody takes him. And then they're going to get that to that pick and realize, oh, he's part of the keeper. So he's kept. So now that's all going to be public information for everyone. Once everyone's keepers are locked in, I'll make sure to make that like a document that I send out. Just make sure, hey, guys, these guys you can't take. Okay. So yeah, league dues will be $25 per manager. I'll begin collecting those after the fantasy draft as normal. And they'll officially be due on Thanksgiving Day. Now, if you want to send them to me early, first of all, great for being proactive. That's completely fine. I'm not requiring that at all. I am not even thinking about next season's dues yet because I have to pay them as well, and that's not on my budget right now. So if you want to send them to me, either give it to me in person, just say, hey, this is for the fantasy season, or just send a Venmo or Cash App and be like, this is for the fantasy season. So I'm not just sitting here like, why'd you send me money? So I just don't want it to cause any confusion, but I'll start actually like asking people, oh, hey, when are you going to get your dues in after the fantasy draft? But that deadline is going to be Thanksgiving Day. That's not going to move. Now, if you have any punishment ideas for the next season, I'll go ahead and say you can let me know at any point. I'll begin getting the Google form together soon. But for right now, that's going to be closer to the NFL season. I'm not really thinking about all that. I'm kind of focused on just playoffs and life as normal. But the season's too far away in the future to start putting a Google form together. But yeah, if you have any punishment ideas or you come across something on Instagram that you're like, hey, that would be cool, just let me know. I'll put it on for the form. We'll vote on it as the same way we did before. But yeah, so just let me know. So special thanks to our mascot again, Kyle, doing the spin and getting out of here. Mark, get out of here. Get out of here, Mark. All right, y'all. Thank you for a great season. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing right now. I'll go ahead and stop the recording. All right, thank y'all.